It started the night I turned 13, a birthday that was supposed to be filled with pizza, dumb jokes, and a new set of headphones I'd circled in the catalog 3 months in a row. Instead, it was the first time I realized my mom had already started forgetting that I existed. My name's Wesley. I'm 18 now, freshly moved out, and finally able to breathe without hearing someone yell my name like I was in trouble. But back then, I was just a kid, one who thought being the man of the house meant something, even though I barely knew how to do algebra, let alone protect anyone. It was just me and Mom for years after my dad bailed. She used to call me her little rock, said I kept her going when things got rough. And they were rough for a while. She worked nights at a diner. We shared a crappy one-bedroom apartment, and our idea of fun was watching old VHS tapes with half the screen static. But we were close. Or at least, I thought we were. Then came Mark. I met him at the worst time, a Tuesday, right before my birthday, after school. I remember because I was supposed to go with Mom to pick out a cake, something we always did together. But instead, she texted me, "Change of plans, just come home." That was weird. She never bailed on cake day. When I walked through the door, she was on the couch, giggling like a teenager while some guy with perfect white teeth and slick back hair had his arm around her like they were already married. He looked at me like I was a surprise she forgot to mention. "Wesley, this is Mark," she said, her voice syrupy. "He's special." I nodded. Didn't know what else to do. I think I managed a hey before walking to my room. No cake that day. No pizza either. 3 weeks later, he moved in. He brought with him 2 kids, Ryan and Hallie. They were twins, both 11, both with that smug energy that screamed private school and back talk. Mark said they were just adjusting. I didn't mind at first. I get it. New people, new house, it's weird. But they didn't seem to be adjusting so much as replacing. Ryan claimed the living room TV like it was his birthright, snatching the remote out of my hand mid-show. Hallie would accidentally spill orange juice on my backpack or knock over my cereal bowl with this fake, wide-eyed innocence that made my mom laugh instead of discipline. "Wesley, don't be so sensitive," she'd say. It started small. That's how these things go, right? First it was missing my birthday. She took the twins to a theme park that weekend because they'd been having a hard time adjusting. Then it was the sleeping arrangements. We had a 3-bedroom now, but suddenly I was sharing mine with Ryan because the twins shouldn't be separated. I remember standing there, holding my backpack, staring at my own bed being turned into a bunk. "Where am I supposed to put my stuff?" I asked. "There's plenty of space in the closet," Mark said. He didn't even look up from his phone. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just shoved my clothes into a single shelf and learned to live out of a laundry basket. Every night, I laid awake while Ryan snored above me, sometimes tossing things at me through the slats just for fun. I started spending more time at the library, claiming I had homework. The truth was, I just needed to be somewhere that didn't feel like a stranger's house. Because that's what it was becoming, strange. Mom's laugh was different now, softer around Mark, harsher with me. She stopped asking about school, stopped checking my grades. She used to come to every parent-teacher night. Now she couldn't even tell you who my homeroom teacher was. The final straw in that first chapter came one Saturday. I was 14 by then, already used to being the shadow in the house. But I still held out hope. Maybe stupidly. Maybe because that's what kids do. I came home from my friend Jonah's after a sleepover. I was in a good mood. We'd stayed up playing games and talking about high school next year. When I walked through the front door, something was off. My posters were gone from the walls. My desk was missing. My bed had been moved. It was Hallie's room now. Pink everywhere. Stuffed animals. Fairy lights. I blinked. What the? Mom came down the hallway like it was totally normal. "Oh, hey, Wes. Yeah, we decided it made more sense this way. Hallie needs her own space, and you're old enough to be in the basement now." The basement. I repeated. It wasn't finished. It was cold. It had spiders. Literal spiders. "Why didn't you ask me?" She crossed her arms. "We don't need to ask for your permission. You're not a guest." "No," I wanted to say. "I'm just an afterthought." I stood there for a long moment, my duffel bag still in my hand. No one helped me move my stuff. I carried it downstairs myself. Mark offered me a cot. Hallie got my bed. Ryan got my desk. It's funny. When you're a kid, you think your parents are superheroes. That they'll always choose you, protect you. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they choose a new life, a new family, and you're left in the basement wondering what you did wrong. It was around that time Mom said it. One night after I tried to bring it up, I asked her, just asked her, why things had changed so much, why I felt like I was on the outside of my own family. She didn't even look up from the dishes. "Wesley, get used to being second. That's just how it is now." That sentence stuck in my head for years. She didn't yell it. She didn't even sound mad. That's what made it worse. It wasn't an insult. It was a fact. Like telling someone it's raining. Just deal with it. So I didn't argue. I stopped trying to get back what we had. I stopped asking for birthdays or cake or a seat at the dinner table. I waited. And I watched. Because something told me this house of cards they'd built, it wasn't going to last. People like Mark, people like Ryan and Hallie, they always slip up. And when they did, I wanted to be ready. The first night in the basement, I barely slept. The cot creaked every time I shifted, and the overhead pipes clanged like they were mocking me. There was a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and even that buzzed like it couldn't stand the silence. I lay there staring at the concrete wall, trying to remember what it felt like when my mom used to brush my hair before school, or how she'd make grilled cheese and tomato soup every time I got sick. That version of her felt like a character in a dream I couldn't quite remember. And the worst part? She was still upstairs, alive and well, just different. Like someone had rewritten her programming and forgot to keep the parts that loved me. The favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. It was deliberate, blatant. Dinner became a game of omission. Hallie didn't like broccoli. Then suddenly, broccoli disappeared from the grocery list. Ryan didn't like my jokes. Then suddenly, I was told to stop trying to start fights every time I opened my mouth. Mark hated video games, so Mom sold my console on Facebook Marketplace without telling me. When I asked where it went, she shrugged and said, "You're too old for that stuff anyway." I started buying snacks with the little money I made mowing lawns, hiding them under a loose floorboard in the basement because every time I left food in the fridge, it mysteriously vanished. Once, I caught Hallie tossing my Gatorade down the sink like it was her personal mission. When I confronted her, she batted her eyelashes and screamed, "He's yelling at me." So loud Mark came storming down with that look in his eyes. The one that said I wasn't worth the oxygen I was using. I took the blame. Again. At school, I kept it together. I had to. People already looked at me funny for wearing worn-out shoes and recycling the same 3 hoodies. But I smiled. I joked around. I did my homework. Because school was the only place where I still felt like a person. Not a mistake. Then came the chore chart. One night, Mark called a family meeting, which really meant, let's all gather while we tell Wesley what to do. He whipped out a printed spreadsheet like he was running a business and assigned all of us roles. Ryan takes out the trash. Hallie does dishes. Wesley handles laundry, sweeping, vacuuming, and cleaning the bathrooms. All the bathrooms? I asked. We had 3. Mark gave me that fake smile. "You're the oldest." Such a good example. Mom just nodded along like this all made sense. I did it. I did it all. I scrubbed toilets while Ryan played Xbox. I vacuumed around Hallie's mountain of shoes while she scrolled TikTok and complained about how dust makes her itchy. I folded their clothes, cleaned their messes, and not once did anyone say thank you. The only time I heard my name was when something went wrong. "Wesley, you missed a spot. Wesley, you shrank my shirt. Wesley, stop acting like a victim." I became a ghost, but still got blamed for everything that broke, cracked, or smelled weird. And still, I didn't fight back. Not really. I held my breath and counted the months. At 16, I started saving seriously. I got a job at the local hardware store, after school, and on weekends. Mark hated that I worked so much, said I was using it as an excuse to avoid family time. Mom backed him up, of course. She said I was missing out on memories. What memories? The ones where Ryan would lock the basement door as a joke? Or where Hallie would unplug the space heater just to test how cold it could get? One winter, I got frostbite on my toes because they thought it was funny to hide my boots. I didn't even cry. I just looked at them and memorized every detail. Every smirk. Every shrug. Every fake apology that came wrapped in sarcasm. Then came the real betrayal. My senior year, I had one goal: college. Not a fancy school, just somewhere far enough to feel like another planet. I studied like crazy, filled out scholarship applications in secret, and begged my guidance counselor to let me use the school computer lab during lunch because the internet in the basement barely worked. When I finally got my acceptance letter, with a scholarship covering most of the tuition, I almost didn't believe it. I held that envelope in my hands for an hour before I opened it. It was the first time in years I felt something real. Like I wasn't invisible. Like maybe I'd actually make it out. I told Mom that night. I didn't expect balloons or cake, but I thought she'd at least smile. She didn't. She looked at the letter, then at me, and said, "That's a lot of money. You sure you're not rushing into this?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Well, you know," she said, exchanging a glance with Mark. "We've got things tight here. And it's not like you've been paying rent." That's when it hit me. They didn't care that I got in. They cared about what it meant for them. Because if I left, so did their free labor. Mark leaned forward. "You're 18 soon. It's not crazy to ask you to contribute." I just stared. "You want me to give up college to pay rent? For a basement?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom said. "We're just saying, maybe wait a year. Help out. Be part of the family." That word again. Family. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It just slipped out, bitter and hollow. "Something funny?" Mark asked. "Yeah," I said. "You people still think I'm part of this family." Mom's face went cold. "Don't talk like that." "You're right," I said, standing. Talking would mean someone's listening. I walked back downstairs, hands shaking. But not from fear. From clarity. I had a plan. I had a way out. And I wasn't going to let them take it from me. But the final blow hadn't landed yet. A week later, I came home from work to find the basement door locked. Not just jammed, padlocked. I knocked. No answer. When I called my mom, she let it go to voicemail. When I texted her, the read receipt popped up, but she never replied. Eventually, she came to the door, arms crossed, expression blank. "We had to make a decision," she said. "What decision?" "You're out, Wesley. We talked about it. If you're going to act like you're on your own, then fine." "You are." My stomach dropped. "You're kicking me out." "You'll be 18 in a week," she said. "You'll be fine. The basement's not your property. It's where I live." "Not anymore." I looked past her, saw Ryan lounging on the couch in a hoodie I'd forgotten I owned. Hallie popped a chip in her mouth and said, "Bye, Wesley." That night, I slept in Jonah's garage. His parents were away, and I didn't want to explain everything yet. I just needed time. A day to think. To feel. I watched the ceiling and replayed every moment. Every time I'd been passed over, blamed, ignored. Every time my mom chose them. Not once. Not by accident. Over and over, on purpose. And I realized something. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd gotten rid of the dead weight. But what they didn't know was that I hadn't left empty-handed. Rock bottom isn't loud. It's not like in the movies, where someone screams in the rain or punches a wall or collapses in dramatic slow motion. No, it's quiet. It creeps up on you when you're alone in someone else's garage, lying on a camping mat that smells like mildew, using your hoodie as a pillow, staring at a ceiling you don't recognize. That first night away, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared. I was beyond scared. I was hollow. Numb. The kind of numb where you're not even sure if you're still real. My fingers kept tracing the ridges on my phone case, like maybe some part of the plastic could ground me in reality. I had one backpack with me. A change of clothes. My phone. A charger. My acceptance letter. That was it. No blanket. No food. No note from my mother wishing me luck. Just silence. When Jonah found me in the morning, I tried to play it off. Said I got locked out. He didn't believe me, but he didn't press. That's one of the things I'll always be grateful for. He gave me space, but not distance. He let me crash on the couch, gave me a towel, and told his parents I was just staying over for college prep. But even that had a time limit. I knew I couldn't stay forever. So I worked. Hard. Every spare hour I wasn't at the hardware store, I was either at school, in the guidance counselor's office figuring out paperwork, or in the public library using their Wi-Fi to file job applications and student housing forms. I skipped senior skip day. I skipped prom. I even skipped graduation. There was no one in the crowd waiting to cheer when my name got called, no camera flashing from the bleachers. So what was the point? Instead, I picked up a double shift. The manager at the hardware store, Mr. Kinney, noticed. He didn't say much, but one day he pulled me aside while I was restocking paint cans and said, "You're a good worker, Wes. You ever need a reference or anything, let me know." That meant more to me than any. "I'm proud of you," my mom never said. By midsummer, I had scraped together enough for a deposit on a shared apartment near campus. It wasn't much, just a room with peeling wallpaper and a tiny window that looked out onto an alley, but it was mine. No one could lock me out. No one could tell me I was second. I moved in with two other guys, Jeremy and Blake. We weren't close, not yet, but they respected boundaries and paid rent on time. That was more than I could say for most of my family. When classes started, I kept my head down, sat in the front, took notes, worked after lectures. My schedule was brutal. 8 a.m. classes, work shifts until 10 p.m., then studying until 2. But I was finally building something. Quietly, without applause, without anyone watching. And slowly, I started to breathe again. I got a second job on weekends at a local coffee shop. It was chaos during rush hour, but I liked it. The constant motion, the hiss of the milk steamer, the rhythm of calling orders. It gave me something to focus on besides the ache in my chest that hadn't quite gone away. One night, I was wiping down the counter when a woman tapped her credit card twice and said, "You've got good hands. Ever thought of being a barista full-time?" I laughed. "Trust me, I'm thinking about everything full-time." She smiled. "Well, you're doing better than most. Just don't burn out." Burn out. The phrase stuck in my head like a warning label. So I gave myself permission to have one small joy a week. Sunday mornings, I'd take my tips and buy myself breakfast at this tiny diner with cracked booths and bottomless coffee. It became a ritual. I'd sit by the window with my laptop, eat waffles, and pretend I wasn't still grieving the mother I technically still had. And that's when it really hit me. Grief doesn't always follow death. Sometimes it follows absence or betrayal. It wasn't just that my mom had changed. It was that she'd chosen to change. Chosen them over me. Over and over again. And the more distance I put between us, the more I saw it for what it was, a pattern. One I didn't cause. One I couldn't fix. There's a strange power in letting go of that guilt. I started going to therapy. The campus offered free sessions for first years, and I figured, why not? My therapist was this soft-spoken guy named Raul who looked like he'd never raise his voice even if a fire alarm went off. The first few sessions, I barely spoke. Just nodded, shrugged, said, "I don't know a lot." Then one day he asked, "What would you say to the younger version of yourself? The kid who just got moved to the basement?" I didn't answer right away. But that night, I went home, stared at my cracked phone screen, and typed something into my notes app. "You're not a burden. You're not invisible. And one day, you'll be free." I don't know why I wrote it, but I kept it. By the end of my first year, I had a 3.8 GPA, 2 steady jobs, and a growing circle of classmates who didn't know anything about my past. They just knew me as the guy who was always on time, always prepared, always calm. They didn't know about the cot, or the locked door, or the sentence that still echoed in my head sometimes. Get used to being second. But I hadn't forgotten. Not even close. The real turning point came one afternoon in May. I was working the coffee shop when a familiar voice called out an order. "Decaf latte, extra sugar." I froze. It was Mark. He didn't recognize me at first. He was on his phone, tapping away, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. I handed him his drink and said, "1 decaf latte." He looked up. His eyes narrowed. "Wesley." I didn't smile. "Hey, Mark." He blinked, clearly thrown. "Wow. You work here?" "Yep." "Didn't know you were still in the area." I shrugged. "College nearby. Figured I'd stay local." He nodded slowly. "Good to see you, man. You look grown." "People do that." There was an awkward silence. Then he leaned in a bit and said, "You should come by sometime. Say hi to your mom. She misses you." My throat clenched. I wanted to ask if she missed me when she turned the lock. If she missed me when she watched Ryan wear my hoodie, or when Hallie dumped my food, or when she said I was second like it was a law of nature. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled politely and said, "Yeah, I'll think about it." He walked out, coffee in hand, and I stood there, heart pounding. That night, I opened the old notes app again. Reread what I wrote. "You're not a burden. You're not invisible. And one day, you'll be free." I added one more line. "They'll regret underestimating you." Because what Mark didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't just left. I had documented everything. Photos, texts, screenshots, voicemails, every cruel comment, every locked door, every screenshot of the group chats where Hallie mocked me or Ryan bragged about getting me kicked out. Even that spreadsheet from the chore chart. All saved. Not because I wanted revenge back then, but because some part of me needed proof that I wasn't crazy. That what happened to me was real. Now that I was on stable ground, now that I had distance and strength and a new life, now I started thinking about what to do with all of it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. They had built a perfect image of a perfect family. My mom loved sharing her life online. family dinners, Ryan's soccer games, Hallie's ballet recitals, the smiling stepdad, the blended family goals. But it was built on a lie. Revenge doesn't happen overnight. It brews, quietly, like a storm gathering behind a mountain, waiting for the perfect moment to roll in. And after what they did to me, locking me out of my own home, erasing me from my own life, I wasn't going to waste the chance to do this right. I didn't want petty. I didn't want loud. I wanted surgical, something they'd feel long after the shock wore off. And I wasn't the same person I used to be. By now, I had 2 years of college under my belt, a growing savings account, and a pretty decent side hustle doing freelance web design. Between classes, jobs, and therapy, I'd built a version of myself that didn't rely on anyone's approval, especially not my mother's. But I still carried the weight of what happened. Not like a wound, but like a file folder I hadn't opened yet. Labeled, neatly, one day. Now that folder was finally in my hands. It started small. The research, the strategy. I needed to know what kind of story they'd built since I left. So I did what any modern kid would do. I followed them online. My mom had a Facebook page filled with filtered selfies and posts about blended family love. Mark had a LinkedIn profile where he described himself as a devoted father of 2 and community volunteer. Ryan had a TikTok where he filmed dumb prank videos and boasted about getting free rides because of his stepdad's dealership connections. Hallie had an Instagram full of ballet poses, matching outfits with her besties, and inspirational quotes she definitely didn't write herself. And me? I didn't exist. I'd been scrubbed clean, like I was a phase they outgrew. Not one photo. Not one mention. Like I'd never lived there. Never sat at their table. Never slept on a cot in their freezing basement. But here's the thing. People who erase you never expect you to keep the receipts. I had everything. Screenshots of group chats where they laughed about how easy it was to get me out. Hallie once bragged that she poured water into my space heater to see if it'd break. Ryan texted a friend that he finally got the cave troll to move out. Even my mom wasn't subtle. There was a text to Mark saying, "He's too much trouble. Let's just tell him to go." Yeah, trouble. For asking for a blanket. I didn't just collect this stuff out of spite. I collected it because I needed to remember that it wasn't in my head, that I wasn't being sensitive, that I wasn't the problem. Now it was time to use it. The first step was finding the perfect opportunity. I didn't want to just expose them online. That would be satisfying for maybe a day, but it wouldn't last. They'd cry, lie, play the victim. People move on fast. No, I needed something public, something permanent. And then it fell into my lap. It was a Thursday when Jonas sent me a screenshot. He still followed Hallie online, mostly for laughs, he said, and she had just posted a photo with the caption, "So proud of my fam. Blended Family of the Year. Hashtag Community Awards 2025 Hashtag Blessed Hashtag Modern Love." Attached to the photo was a flyer. The annual Crestview Community Awards, held every year by the town council. Locals could nominate families, teachers, volunteers. There was food, music, a slideshow of honorees. And this year, Mark and my mom were being awarded the Blended Family of the Year trophy for their outstanding commitment to love, unity, and kindness. I almost choked on my coffee. Kindness. I reread the caption 3 times. Then I clicked the link to the event. It was scheduled for the end of the month. Open to the public. Speeches included. Mark was set to give one on fatherhood and leadership. There was a slideshow presentation during the ceremony. A local news reporter was covering it for the town's lifestyle segment. It was perfect. Jonah texted me, "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a second. Then I replied, "Better than I've ever been." I had 3 weeks to set the stage. First, I printed everything. Every message. Every screenshot. Every picture of the basement, of the chore chart, of the missing birthday gifts, of the broken space heater, of the padlocked door. I organized them chronologically in a binder with labeled tabs. I even included the date my mom sold my game console online, matched it with a Facebook Marketplace post I found on an old account. Every little betrayal, itemized. Then I recorded a video. Just me, talking to the camera. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I just laid it out, plain and clear. My name is Wesley. I'm the son they forgot. The one they left in the basement. The one they kicked out a week before his 18th birthday because I didn't fit into their new family image. I'm not here to get sympathy. I'm here to tell the truth. The full video was 26 minutes long. I didn't plan to post it right away, but it was ready. Next, I contacted the town council. Said I was a student journalist working on a feature about community nominees. Asked for a copy of the speech lineup and any submitted bios. They sent everything. Mark's bio was laughable. Proud father of 2 incredible children and stepfather to a once troubled teen who has since moved on to build his own future thanks to our support. Support? They gave me a cot and kicked me to the curb. Even better, the council had requested a photo slideshow from each honoree. I knew what that meant. Pictures of Hallie's ballet recitals, Ryan's soccer trophies, Mark holding a barbecue spatula with a beer in hand. All carefully curated. But here's the thing about curated slideshows. Someone has to submit them. And my mom had always been terrible with tech. I created a fake Gmail account, familymoments2025@gmail.com. Then I sent a follow-up to the event organizer, pretending to be my mom's assistant. So sorry, the original slideshow had an error. Please replace it with this updated version. She'll be so grateful. Attached was a new slideshow. Same file name, same structure. But this version? This one included photos they thought were long gone. A photo of my basement cot next to a space heater with a cracked plug. A blurry picture of Hallie smirking as she dumped my cereal on the floor. A screenshot of the chore chart where I was assigned every cleaning task in the house. A text thread of Ryan calling me a freeloader basement rat. And then, at the very end, a full-screen image of my acceptance letter. The one my mom told me was a waste of time. Beneath it, one line of text in bold. I didn't leave. I was erased. I sent it. Got a confirmation email. Next step, RSVP. I bought a cheap suit from a thrift store. Cleaned my shoes. Shaved. Practiced standing still in the mirror until I didn't look like I wanted to run. Then, I reached out to one more person. Ms. Alvarez, my high school guidance counselor. She was the only adult who ever really paid attention, who saw through the polite nods and fake smiles I wore every time I walked into her office. She once told me, "Wesley, survival isn't the same as living. One day, you'll get to choose both." I emailed her and asked if she'd be attending the ceremony. Turned out she would. She was presenting an award to one of the teachers. I told her everything. She replied the next morning, "I believe you. I'll be there." The night before the event, I didn't sleep much. I went over everything in my head 1,000 times. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to remember who I was walking in as. Not the forgotten kid. Not the ghost in the basement. But someone who built a life from the ashes. I looked at myself in the mirror, straightened my jacket, and whispered, "Let's go make them remember." The morning of the Crestview Community Awards was crisp, too bright for the storm I was about to bring. I arrived early. I wanted to watch it unfold from the shadows for a while before stepping into the light. The venue was a local event hall decked out with balloons, folding chairs, and plastic tablecloths in red and gold, the town colors. A volunteer at the front handed me a program. Right there on page 2, Blended Family of the Year, presented to Mark, Natalie, Ryan, and Hallie Foster. Natalie. That was what she went by now. Not Mom. Just Natalie. Guess, mother of 3, didn't fit the story she wanted to sell. People began filing in, teachers, students, the mayor, even a local news crew with a camera on a tripod. I found a seat near the back, my thrifted suit blending in well enough. No one looked twice at me, which was fine. That was the plan. Mark and my mom arrived 20 minutes later. He wore a tailored navy blazer, Mom a pastel dress with pearls, and that same fake smile she'd used on me the night she let Hallie take my room. Ryan and Hallie followed, looking bored but polished. A perfect portrait. A perfect lie. I watched them greet the town council members, shake hands, take selfies. I even saw Mark hand someone a flash drive, probably the approved slideshow he'd made. Too late. The event began with the usual droning speeches. Applause here and there. Awards for Best New Teacher, Outstanding Youth Volunteer. I clapped politely, eyes on the slideshow laptop set up by the stage. Then came the announcement. And now, the host beamed. Our most heartwarming award of the evening, Blended Family of the Year. Let's give it up for the Foster family. People clapped. Chairs creaked. My mom looked like she was holding back tears. Not the sad kind. The look how far we've come kind. Mark walked to the mic and started his speech. Thank you so much. When Natalie and I brought our families together, we faced challenges like anyone else. But love, patience, and open hearts helped us build something beautiful. I almost laughed. Almost. Then the lights dimmed. Let's take a moment, the host interrupted, to see what this amazing family journey has looked like. The projector clicked. Slide 1. A cheerful family photo of them at the park. Slide 2. Hallie on stage in a tutu. Slide 3. A blurry photo of a basement cot, stained mattress, and space heater with a melted plug. I saw my mom's smile falter. Slide 4. A text thread. Ryan, the troll is still breathing. Thought he'd freeze last night, lol. Slide 5. The chore chart. My name next to all the cleaning duties. Hallie and Ryan, none. Slide 6. A Facebook message. Mom, he's just not worth the energy. We're better off focusing on the twins. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Mark stepped toward the tech booth, whispering something sharp, but the event coordinator shook her head and pointed to the email confirmation. Updated slideshow submitted by Natalie Foster. They couldn't stop it. Slide 7. A photo of me, skinny, tired, sitting in the library with a backpack and the caption beneath. Wesley Foster, the son they erased. Then the final slide. My college acceptance letter. Bright, clear. Underneath it. I didn't leave. I was discarded. But I made it anyway. Silence. You could hear the air conditioning humming. The host cleared his throat like he wasn't sure if the event should continue. Mark was red, visibly shaking. My mom was pale, her jaw clenched. Hallie had pulled out her phone, probably texting someone. Ryan was frozen, face blank. And then I stood up. People turned. My voice cut through the hush. Hi, I'm Wesley. I used to be part of that family. Until they decided I didn't fit the photo ops. A few people gasped. One woman up front whispered, "That's him." I walked down the aisle, calm, measured. Not to fight, just to finish. For years, I was told to be grateful for the scraps they gave me. I slept on a cot in a freezing basement while they took my room. I scrubbed their toilets while they went to soccer practice and recitals. I was told I was second, less than, replaceable. I turned toward the stage. But I wasn't. My mom's lips parted like she wanted to speak, but I held up a hand. You don't get to say anything. You had years. Then I turned back to the audience. I didn't come here for applause. I came here because people like them build their reputations on half-truths and filters. But I kept the receipts. And now you've seen them. I stepped back. Enjoy the rest of the awards. Then I walked out. Behind me, I heard nothing but stunned silence. A few murmurs. No applause this time. Outside, the sky was turning orange with sunset. I felt the wind on my face, and, for the first time in years, it didn't sting. It felt like air I deserved to breathe. But it wasn't over. By morning, the video I had pre-scheduled had gone live. The 26-minute breakdown of my story. I uploaded it right after the event. Sent the link to local reporters. Titled it, Blended Family of the Year, What They Don't Want You to Know. It spread faster than I expected. Within 24 hours, the comment section exploded. People recognized the venue, the award show. Some even recognized my mom. One person commented, "This kid bagged his entire family with a PowerPoint and a slow walk. That's art." Another, "Mark Foster's dealership removed all their family posts. Guilty conscience much." By the end of the week, Mark had locked his LinkedIn. The dealership's Yelp page had a wave of one-star reviews mentioning basement cots and child neglect. My mom deleted her Facebook entirely. Hallie and Ryan went private on everything. But the best part? The town council issued a statement 2 days later. Due to recent revelations, the Foster family has been stripped of the 2025 Blended Family of the Year title. And then Ms. Alvarez called me. "You did it," she said. "I've never seen a takedown that clean." I didn't want revenge, I told her. She laughed gently. "Sweetheart, that wasn't revenge. That was justice." Weeks passed. I didn't hear from my mom. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a pathetic apology. And that was fine. Because I had my own apartment now. My own job. My own life. The story made its rounds, but eventually faded, like all news does. People moved on. But not them. They'd built their perfect image on a lie. And I held up a mirror. They had to live in that reflection now, no matter how many filters they tried to use. As for me, I kept walking, one step at a time, no longer waiting to be seen, no longer asking to be chosen. I had already chosen myself, and I wasn't second anymore. I never was. I was just the only one who knew it. Until now. I still remember the exact moment I realized my family had decided that the easiest way to deal with me was to pretend my memories were broken. Not wrong. Not mistaken. Broken. Like something faulty they could all quietly agree to ignore until it stopped making noise. I'm Elijah. I'm 32 now. And for most of my life, my family has treated me like the unreliable narrator of my own childhood. The story always starts the same way when I try to explain it to people outside my family. I'll mention something small, almost casual, a memory, a detail, and I'll see the look on their face when they realize this isn't just some petty argument or old sibling rivalry. It's something deeper, something coordinated. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Growing up, my family looked normal from the outside. 2 parents, 2 sons, a quiet house in a decent neighborhood. No screaming matches in the front yard. No police visits. No obvious chaos. If anything, people described us as private and well put together. My parents liked that reputation. They protected it carefully. My older brother, Marcus, was the center of everything. He was 3 years older than me, louder, more confident, and naturally good at the kind of things adults praise. Sports, charisma, knowing when to speak and when to smile. He learned early how to perform for approval, and my parents rewarded him for it. I was different, quieter, observant. I noticed patterns. I remembered conversations. I held on to moments the way other kids held on to toys. At first, my parents called me sensitive, then imaginative, eventually dramatic. By the time I was a teenager, they'd upgraded that word to confused. The first time it happened, I was maybe 10. I remember it clearly because it was the first time I felt that strange sensation in my chest, like the ground had shifted under my feet, but no one else noticed. Marcus had broken something, a small but expensive thing, a watch my grandfather had given my dad. I saw it happen. I watched him knock it off the dresser while messing around in their bedroom. I remember the sound it made when it hit the floor, the way Marcus froze, the way he looked at me and said, very calmly, "Don't say anything." Later that evening, my dad found the watch, shattered. I told the truth. I said Marcus did it. There was a long silence at the dinner table. Then my mom smiled at me. Not a warm smile. A careful one. "Elijah," she said, "why would you make something like that up?" I remember looking at my brother. He didn't look scared. He looked bored. My dad sighed and said, "You have a vivid imagination, buddy. That's not always a good thing." Marcus didn't get punished. I gotta talk about honesty. That should have been a one-time thing. Kids lie. Parents correct them. End of story. Except it kept happening. Little things at first. Who said what? Who agreed to something? Who promised? Every time there was a conflict between my memory and theirs, mine was the problem. When I was 13, I reminded my parents they'd promised to help me pay for a school trip. My mom frowned and said, "We never said that." My dad added, "You must have misunderstood." When I was 16, I brought up a conversation where my dad had told me I could use the car if I kept my grades up. He looked genuinely surprised. "I would never promise something like that," he said. Marcus always backed them up. Every time. Calm. Certain. Almost rehearsed. By the time I moved out for college, I'd learned an important lesson. If everyone in the room agrees you're wrong, it doesn't matter how clearly you remember being right. Still, some part of me held on to those memories. I didn't talk about them much. I told myself it wasn't worth the argument. That families misremember things all the time. That I was being too sensitive. But then there was the thing I wasn't supposed to remember. The thing they really didn't want me to talk about. It happened when I was 19, right before I left for college. There was a folder in my parents' home office. Plain. Beige. Nothing special about it except where it was kept. Top drawer, locked. I only saw it because my mom asked me to grab stamps from the desk one afternoon, and the drawer was open just a crack. Inside were papers with my name on them. Not school forms. Not medical stuff. Letters. Notes. Printed emails. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But curiosity isn't something you can turn off once it's been lit. I read enough to understand one thing very clearly. There had been conversations about me. About what I remembered. About what I shouldn't remember. One line burned itself into my brain because it felt so deliberate, so calculated that my hands actually started shaking. "We can't let him find out. He'll never let it go." I didn't confront them. Not then. I closed the drawer. I put the stamps on the desk. I went to my room and sat on my bed, staring at the wall, trying to convince myself I was misreading everything. By the time I came back downstairs, my mom was smiling again. Normal. Warm. Asking what I wanted for dinner. And just like that, the moment passed. Or at least, that's what they thought. Years went by. I built a life outside of them. job, friends, an apartment that felt like mine. I didn't cut my family off, but I kept them at arm's length. Phone calls on holidays, dinners that stayed polite and shallow. Marcus thrived. Promotions, praise. My parents talked about him like he was a success story they'd personally authored. Anytime I hinted at the past, the temperature in the room dropped. "You're remembering a story that only exists in your head," my mom said once, gently, like she was explaining a child's nightmare. Marcus was less gentle. "Drop it," he said. "You always do this." For a long time, I did drop it. Until last month. It was a family dinner. One of those obligatory gatherings where everyone pretends things are fine because it's easier than admitting they're not. We were sitting around the table, talking about something trivial. I don't even remember what started it. Maybe that's the worst part. I mentioned a decision my parents had made years ago. Something small but specific. Something I knew was true. My dad frowned. My mom tilted her head. "That never happened," she said. Marcus leaned back in his chair and laughed. Here we go again. I felt that old sensation in my chest. The shift. The silence closing in. "You're remembering a story that only exists in your head," my mom repeated. My brother met my eyes and said, "Drop it." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and asked one quiet question. "Then why does this say, we can't let him find out?" The room went very, very still. No one spoke right away after I asked that question. Not because they were shocked into silence in a dramatic, movie scene way. It was quieter than that. Heavier. Like everyone in the room was suddenly calculating something at the same time, running numbers in their head, deciding what the least damaging response would be. My mom was the first to recover. She always was. She let out a small, confused laugh and reached for her wine glass, even though she hadn't been drinking much that night. "Elijah," she said, drawing my name out like she was humoring me. "I don't know what you think you're showing us, but you're taking something wildly out of context." I turned my phone so they could all see the screen. Not dramatically. I didn't shove it toward anyone. I just set it on the table between the salt and pepper like it belonged there. It was a screenshot. An old email thread. Dated years ago. My name appeared in it more times than I was comfortable counting. The line I'd quoted was right there in black and white. "We can't let him find out. He'll never let it go." My dad squinted at it, then leaned back in his chair. His jaw tightened. He didn't say anything yet, which was unusual. He was usually quick to step in and smooth things over. Marcus leaned forward instead. He studied the screen for a few seconds, then looked up at me with something close to irritation, not fear. "Where did you get that?" he asked. That question mattered more than anything else he could have said. Not "what is that?" or "why are you doing this?" Just "where did you get it?" I felt my pulse pick up. "So you recognize it?" "I didn't say that," he replied quickly. "I'm asking where you got it." My mom set her glass down harder than she meant to. "This is private," she said. "You had no right to go through our things." That was it. That was the pivot. Not denial. Not confusion. Just immediate offense. "So it's real," I said quietly. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then sighed in that familiar way that always meant she was about to explain something to me like I was difficult, not wronged. "Elijah, you don't understand the full picture." "I'd love to," I said. "Because for years you've all been telling me I'm imagining things." My dad finally spoke. "You need to calm down." I laughed once, short and sharp. "I am calm. This is the calmest I've ever been about this, actually." Marcus leaned back again, crossing his arms. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, I spent most of my life being told my memories were fake, and now I'm looking at proof that you were all talking about hiding things from me." My mom shook her head slowly. "We were trying to protect you." "From what?" She hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But I saw it. My dad jumped in. "From unnecessary stress. From overthinking. You've always had a tendency to fixate." That word. Fixate. They love that one. "So your solution was to lie to me?" I asked. "Over and over." "We didn't lie," my mom said quickly. "We reframed things. For your own good." I stared at her. "Do you hear yourself?" Marcus scoffed. "This is exactly why we didn't want you digging into this stuff. You turn everything into some kind of conspiracy." Something inside me cracked then. Not loudly. Just enough to let the anger seep through. "You don't get to say that," I said. "Not when you've backed them up every single time. Not when you've watched them tell me I was wrong about my own life." He shrugged. Someone had to be the adult in the room. That hurt more than I expected. I looked at my parents. Did you ever think about how this might affect me? Growing up being told my memories weren't real. My mom reached for my hand. I pulled it away before she could touch me. We were doing our best, she said softly. You were sensitive. You read too much into things. We didn't want you spiraling. So you decided I couldn't be trusted with the truth, I said. My dad rubbed his temple. You're twisting this. No, I said. I'm finally untwisting it. There was a long pause, the kind where the room feels too small. Then Marcus spoke again, and his tone shifted. Less defensive, more annoyed. You want the truth? He said. Fine. The truth is, you couldn't handle it back then. You still can't. I felt my chest tighten. Handle what? He looked at my parents, then back at me. See? This is why. Handle what, Marcus? I repeated. My mom's face went pale. Marcus, don't. He waved her off. No, it's time. He brought it up. My dad's eyes flashed. This isn't the way. I watched them argue over my head like I wasn't even there, like I was a problem to manage instead of a person. Say it, I said. Whatever it is you think I can't handle. Marcus exhaled sharply. Fine. You want to know why everyone tiptoed around you? Why we tried to steer you away from certain memories? Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. Because the truth would have ruined things, he said. For all of us. For who? I asked. You? He didn't answer right away. That told me everything. My mom stood up abruptly. That's enough. We're not doing this. I stood too. No. You don't get to shut this down anymore. My dad's voice dropped. Sit down, Elijah. I didn't. You've spent years telling me I'm remembering a story that only exists in my head, I said. So tell me why you were so afraid of me finding out something that apparently never happened. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Real or practiced, I couldn't tell anymore. We did what we had to do, she said. For who? I asked again. Silence. Marcus broke it. For me. The word hung in the air. I looked at him slowly. What? He straightened his shoulders. Everything you keep bringing up? The things you think were taken from you? The decisions you think were unfair? My heart started pounding. They were, he said. But not by accident. My dad snapped. Marcus. No, Marcus said. He's already halfway there. Might as well stop pretending. I felt dizzy. Stop pretending what? That you were ever going to come out on top, he said bluntly. I stared at him. You're saying you knew? All this time. He nodded. Of course I did. We talked about it. My mom covered her mouth. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in a minute. Talked about what? I whispered. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and matter-of-fact, like he was explaining a rule I'd somehow missed. That some things were better left with me, he said. Opportunities. Decisions. Certain benefits. Benefits, I repeated. He shrugged. Someone had to be the priority. The room felt like it was tilting. So you let them convince me I was wrong, I said. You watched them do it. Yes, he said. And I'd do it again. That was the moment. The exact point where something in me shut off. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just stood there, realizing that everything I'd ever doubted about myself had been carefully installed by the people who were supposed to protect me. My mom reached toward me again. Elijah, please. You're misunderstanding. I took a step back. No. For the first time, I understand perfectly. My dad tried to speak, but I held up a hand. I need you all to understand something, I said slowly. I didn't come here tonight to fight. Marcus scoffed. Then why bring that up? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, I said. And now I know. I picked up my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. You've been very careful, I said. You made sure I doubted myself, that I stayed quiet, that I didn't ask the wrong questions. My mom's voice was barely audible. Elijah, but you missed one thing, I said, looking directly at my brother. You assumed I never noticed. Marcus frowned. What are you talking about? I walked toward the door, grabbed my jacket, and turned back to face them one last time. I'm done letting you tell me who I am, I said. And I'm definitely done pretending this was all in my head. My dad took a step toward me. You don't want to do this. I met his eyes. I already am. As I opened the door, my mom called my name, her voice breaking. Please, she said. Let's just forget tonight happened. I paused, my hand on the handle, and felt something close to calm settle over me. That's the one thing I'm not going to do, I said. I didn't go home that night. Not because I was afraid to be alone, but because I knew if I sat in my apartment with nothing but my thoughts, I'd start unraveling in ways I couldn't afford yet. I drove. No destination. Just streetlights and empty roads and the sound of my own breathing filling the car. For the first hour, I felt nothing. Just a strange, hollow quiet. Like someone had finally turned off a constant background noise I hadn't realized was there my whole life. The second hour was worse. That's when the questions started creeping in. Not the big ones yet. The small, poisonous ones. What else don't I know? What else did they decide for me? How much of my life was steered without me realizing it? By the time I pulled over and shut the engine off, the weight of it hit all at once. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and laughed under my breath. Because if I didn't laugh, I knew I'd do something else. Something louder. Something messier. I slept in the car for a few hours. When I woke up, the sun was just coming up, washing everything in that soft light that usually feels hopeful. That morning, it just made me tired. I called in sick to work. I didn't explain. I didn't have the energy to invent a polite lie. I went home, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the floor of my living room with my back against the couch. I stayed there for a long time. The next few weeks were rough. Not in a dramatic, everything falls apart at once way. Worse than that. Quietly rough. The kind where you still go to work, still answer emails, still smile at coworkers, but every interaction feels like it's happening through thick glass. My family didn't reach out right away. That should have told me something, but at the time it just added to the ache. I checked my phone more often than I'd like to admit. No messages. No calls. It felt like being erased in real time. When they did finally reach out, it wasn't an apology. It was my mom, leaving a voicemail that sounded exhausted more than concerned. She said we'd all said things we didn't mean. That tensions were high. That I should come over so we could reset. Reset. Like the problem was a glitch, not a pattern. Marcus texted once. Just one line. You don't have to blow up the family over this. That was it. No denial. No explanation. Just a quiet reminder of where the blame would land if I didn't fall back into place. I didn't respond. That's when things started to slip. I stopped sleeping well. I'd wake up with my heart racing, replaying old moments in my head, suddenly seeing them through a different lens. Conversations I'd shrugged off before now felt loaded. Decisions I'd accepted without question suddenly felt engineered. There were days I wondered if they were right. If maybe I really was overreacting. Years of being told you're unreliable doesn't disappear overnight. It burrows deep. One night, after staring at my ceiling for hours, I finally admitted something to myself that scared me more than anything else. I didn't trust my own instincts. That realization hurt worse than the betrayal itself. I started second-guessing everything. Small choices. Big ones. Even my emotions. Was I angry for a reason, or just being dramatic? Was this hurt justified, or was I spiraling like they'd always warned? It got bad enough that I almost reached out just to make the doubt stop. Almost apologized for something I knew, logically, wasn't my fault. What stopped me was something small and stupid. I found an old notebook. I wasn't looking for it. I was cleaning out a drawer, trying to distract myself, when I came across it wedged between random papers. It was from my early 20s. A cheap spiral notebook I used to jot things down when my thoughts got loud. I flipped through it without much expectation. Page after page of dates. Notes. Conversations written down in plain language. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. Dad said X. Mom promised Y. Marcus disagreed, then later denied it. At the time, I'd written these things down because I thought I was forgetful. Because I wanted to be better. More accurate. More reliable. Reading it now felt like someone had punched the air back into my lungs. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't exaggerated. I had been documenting reality. I sat on the floor, notebook in my lap, and cried harder than I had that night at my parents' house. Not because of what I'd lost, but because of what I'd almost lost. Myself. That notebook became my anchor. Whenever doubt crept in, I opened it. Whenever I felt that old reflex to apologize for existing, I reminded myself that I'd known something was wrong long before I had proof. I'd just been taught not to trust that knowledge. That's when rebuilding started. Slowly, quietly, without telling anyone. I stopped engaging with my family's version of events entirely. If my mom texted something vague and loaded, I responded politely but briefly. No explanations. No emotional hooks. Marcus stopped texting altogether once he realized I wasn't biting. At work, something shifted too. I started speaking up more in meetings. Not aggressively, just clearly. I noticed how often I'd previously deferred, even when I knew I was right. That stopped. I took on projects I would have avoided before. Asked for responsibilities I'd convinced myself I wasn't ready for. The first time my boss thanked me for being decisive, it felt unreal. Like praise meant for someone else that had accidentally landed on me. Outside of work, I started seeing a therapist. Not because I wanted to fix myself, but because I wanted someone neutral to help me untangle what was mine and what had been planted. Saying things out loud, hearing them reflected back without judgment, was grounding in a way I hadn't expected. "You were conditioned," she said once, calmly. "That doesn't make you weak. It makes your awareness now incredibly powerful." I held on to that. Months passed. The silence from my family stretched on. At first, it felt like punishment. Then, gradually, it felt like relief. I started doing things just because I wanted to. Took a short trip on a whim. Rearranged my apartment. Made choices without mentally rehearsing how I'd justify them to anyone else. For the first time in my life, I felt solid. That's when the rise really began. Not flashy, not dramatic, but steady. I got a promotion I hadn't even realized I was in line for. I made new friends who didn't question my memories or minimize my feelings. I learned how to trust my own reactions again, little by little. And somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for my family to acknowledge what they'd done. That was the moment they lost their power. Of course, that didn't mean they were done. Because just when I felt like I was finally standing on my own feet, the past came knocking again. Not with apologies. Not with explanations. With pressure. It started with a message from my dad. Longer than usual. Carefully worded. "We need to talk. There are things you don't fully understand. This is bigger than you think." I stared at the screen for a long time before locking my phone and setting it face down on the table. Bigger than I think. That was when I realized something unsettling. Whatever they'd been hiding from me, it wasn't over. I didn't respond to my dad's message right away. That alone felt like progress. Old me would have panicked, reread it a dozen times, tried to decode the tone, worried about what silence might provoke. This time, I let it sit. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I slept. When I finally picked up my phone again, the message looked smaller somehow. Less powerful. "We need to talk. There are things you don't fully understand. This is bigger than you think." What struck me wasn't the content. It was the framing. Bigger than you think. Not "we hurt you." Not "we owe you the truth." Just another reminder that, in their minds, I was still the one who didn't understand. That was when I stopped thinking about closure and started thinking about clarity. Not for them. For me. I pulled out the old notebook again. Then I opened a new document on my laptop. I started listing things. Dates. Decisions. Patterns. Not emotions. Facts. Every time Marcus had been favored in a way that directly cost me something. Every opportunity that had quietly slipped out of my reach with no explanation at the time. Every moment I'd been told I was mistaken, confused, or remembering things wrong. The list grew faster than I expected. Some of it made my stomach turn. Scholarships I hadn't applied for because I was told I wasn't eligible, only to later find out Marcus had applied for something similar. Family connections that had somehow always benefited him. Conversations with my parents that now read very differently in hindsight. I wasn't jumping to conclusions. I was connecting dots. And the more dots I connected, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just favoritism. It was management. They hadn't just protected Marcus. They'd curated his path. And they'd done it, at least in part, by keeping me uncertain, hesitant, and small. I realized something else too. For all their confidence, they were nervous now. The silence, the careful wording, the sudden need to talk. If they truly believed I was harmless, they wouldn't be reaching out at all. That's when I decided I wasn't going to confront them blindly. I was going to prepare. The first thing I did was reach out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My aunt, my dad's sister. Growing up, she'd always seemed slightly outside the family orbit. Still invited. Still polite. But never fully absorbed into the group dynamics. I used to think she just didn't care much. Now I wondered if she'd seen more than she let on. I kept the message neutral. No accusations. No drama. "Hey, this might sound random, but I've been thinking about some old family stuff. Do you remember anything about decisions made around when I left for college?" She didn't reply immediately. When she did, it was brief. "Yes, I do. Call me." That call changed everything. She didn't rush. She didn't interrupt. She let me talk. Let me explain what had happened recently, what I'd found, what I was starting to piece together. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," she said quietly. I closed my eyes. She told me things I'd never heard before. About arguments she'd had with my parents behind closed doors. About how hard they'd pushed for Marcus to get certain advantages. About concerns she'd raised about how I was being handled. They said you were fragile, she told me. That you'd fall apart if you felt overshadowed. So instead they made me doubt myself, I said. Yes, she replied. And they told themselves it was kindness. That word again. Kindness. Protection. Reframing. I thanked her for being honest. She hesitated before hanging up. Be careful, she said. They don't like losing control. After that, I started paying attention in a different way. Not just to the past, but to the present. My parents reached out again. This time it was my mom, asking if we could meet for coffee. Neutral ground, she said, like she was negotiating a ceasefire. I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation, because I wanted information. The meeting was exactly what I expected. She cried. She apologized without apologizing. She said things like, we did the best we could, and we never meant to hurt you. When I asked specific questions, she got vague. When I pressed, she deflected. But she slipped. More than once. She mentioned finances without meaning to. Talked about decisions made early on that had long-term implications. Each time, she caught herself and pivoted, but I noticed. Marcus didn't come up much. That alone was telling. I didn't argue. I listened. I nodded. I let her think she was slowly pulling me back in. That was the hardest part. Pretending. But I understood now that this wasn't about proving them wrong in a single dramatic moment. It was about shifting the balance. I also reached out to an old family friend. Someone who'd known us all when we were younger. Someone who'd been present for more than a few key moments on my list. I asked careful questions. Neutral ones. They confirmed things without realizing they were doing it. Oh, your parents were so worried about you, they said. They always said you needed a gentler path. Gentler. That word made my jaw tighten. Meanwhile, Marcus stayed quiet. Too quiet. Until he didn't. He called me one evening out of the blue. His voice was casual, almost friendly, like nothing had happened. Dad says you're asking questions, he said. I am, I replied. There was a pause. You should stop. Why? Because you're digging into things that don't help anyone. Who do they help, Marcus? I asked. He sighed. You really want to do this? I already am, I said. His tone hardened. You think you're ready for whatever comes out of this? I think I've been ready longer than you realize. He laughed softly. You always did think that. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at my dark phone screen. Not angry. Focused. That was when I made a decision. I wasn't going to expose everything all at once. I wasn't going to confront them with a list and demand justice. That would just push them into denial mode again. Close ranks. Rewrite the narrative. No, I was going to let them show their hand. I started asking the right questions in the right places. Quietly. Professionally. I looked into old accounts. Old paperwork. Nothing illegal on my end. Just curiosity. I talked to people I trusted. I built a timeline that made sense. I kept everything documented. And slowly, a shape emerged. Not just of what had been taken from me, but of what was at stake for them if the truth surfaced fully. That was the moment something shifted inside me. This wasn't about healing anymore. This was about leverage. I didn't know exactly how it would end yet. I didn't need to. What mattered was that for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And somewhere deep down, I could feel it. They were starting to realize I wasn't the same person they'd molded. And they were afraid. I didn't confront them right away. That was the last mistake they expected me to make. Instead, I waited. I kept playing the role they were most comfortable with. Quiet, distant, but not hostile. I responded to messages politely. I showed up when absolutely necessary. I asked questions in ways that sounded curious, not accusatory. The kind of questions that make people relax because they think they're still in control. And while they relaxed, I finished building the full picture. The truth was uglier than I expected, but also cleaner. Clearer. There was no single explosive secret. No one moment where everything went wrong. It was a series of decisions. Small ones. Convenient ones. Always justified as temporary. Always framed as best for everyone. My parents had access to resources early on. Money, connections, influence. When it came time to decide how to distribute those advantages, they made a choice. They chose Marcus. Not because I was incapable. Not because I was fragile. But because Marcus was predictable. Easier to manage. Easier to showcase. Easier to build a narrative around. I was the variable. So they minimized me. They redirected opportunities without telling me. They discouraged applications I would have qualified for. They subtly framed my confidence as arrogance and my caution as weakness. And when I noticed, when I pushed back, when I remembered too clearly, they didn't argue the facts. They argued my reality. By the time I had everything laid out, there was no rage left. Just resolve. The opportunity to end it came sooner than I expected. My parents decided it was time for a family meeting. Their words, not mine. They framed it as reconciliation, healing, moving forward. They invited extended family. My aunt, a couple of cousins, even a family friend who'd always played mediator. Marcus would be there. I agreed to come, not to confront them emotionally, to conclude something. We met at my parents' house. Same dining room, same table, same seats, even. Some habits never die. My mom opened with a speech about love, about misunderstandings, about how families sometimes hurt each other without meaning to. My dad nodded along, adding comments about perspective and growth. Marcus sat back, arms crossed, wearing that same faintly amused expression he'd had my whole life. When they finished, they looked at me. This was my cue to apologize, to soften, to reassure them that the system still worked. Instead, I took a breath and said, I agree. It's time we move forward. Relief washed over my mom's face. Marcus smirked. So, I continued calmly. Before we do, I just want to clear up a few factual things. So there's no confusion anymore. My dad stiffened. Elijah. I'll be brief, I said. I pulled out a folder. Not dramatically. I set it on the table the same way I'd set my phone down weeks earlier. Quiet. Deliberate. Inside were copies. Documents. Emails. Records. Nothing stolen. Nothing illegal. Just things they hadn't realized I could access, confirm, or corroborate now. I started with the college fund. I explained, clearly and without emotion, how funds initially designated for both of us had been redirected, how timelines overlapped with Marcus's expenses, how I'd been told certain options weren't viable when, in fact, they'd already been allocated elsewhere. My mom tried to interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. I just kept going. Then I moved on to professional connections, introductions I'd never received, recommendations quietly made on Marcus's behalf, calls placed without my knowledge, doors opened for him and gently closed for me, all while I was told I simply wasn't ready yet. The room grew very quiet. I didn't accuse. I narrated. Every time my dad tried to reframe, I calmly pointed to dates, names, confirmations from third parties. People in the room started shifting uncomfortably, not because they were angry, because they were realizing this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. Finally, Marcus spoke. What's your point? I met his eyes. My point is that you didn't just benefit from favoritism. You relied on my silence. And you assumed I'd never stop doubting myself. He laughed, but it sounded thin. So what? You want an apology? No, I said. I want accountability. My mom's voice trembled. Elijah, this is tearing the family apart. I nodded. No, this is exposing what's been holding it together. I turned to my aunt. She didn't look surprised, just tired. I'm not asking anyone here to take sides, I said. I'm just making something clear. I stood up. I won't be participating in this version of the family anymore. My dad looked stunned. You can't just. I can't, I said. And I am. Then I delivered the part they hadn't prepared for. I've already made my own arrangements. Financially, professionally, legally. Marcus's smile vanished. I'm not asking for restitution, I continued. I'm removing myself from any future entanglements. No shared assets. No expectations. No leverage. My mom started crying openly now. So that's it. You're cutting us off. I considered the question carefully. No, I said. I'm opting out. The difference mattered. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam doors. I gathered my folder and walked out the same way I'd walked in. Calm. Certain. The fallout was immediate. My parents tried damage control. Calls. Messages. Long emails full of regret and rationalization. Marcus tried a different tactic. Anger. Blame. He accused me of humiliating him, of sabotaging his relationship with our parents. For the first time, none of it landed. Extended family started asking questions. Quiet ones. Uncomfortable ones. The narrative my parents had relied on for decades started to fracture under scrutiny. Not explosively. Slowly. Irreversibly. Marcus struggled more than he let on. Without my silence to prop him up, without the contrast they'd always used to make him look steady, his cracks showed. At work, in relationships, in ways my parents couldn't smooth over anymore. As for me, something strange happened. Life got quieter, not emptier, clearer. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. I built a life that didn't require permission. I trusted my instincts without second-guessing them. I stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen. I stopped hoping for validation that would never come. Months later, my mom sent one last message. "I'm sorry we didn't protect you the way we should have." I read it once. I didn't respond. Because some apologies come too late to matter. And some truths don't need forgiveness to be powerful. The greatest revenge wasn't exposing them. It was believing myself.